very much, Peter. Hello, everyone. Hope you enjoyed lunch. Well, we've had the opportunity over the past day and a half to hear from numerous executives about how they are sense-checking and perhaps adjusting their corporate strategies in response to near-term demands for energy security and returns against ever-present needs to accelerate the energy transition. For Equinor, this strategic fine-tuning has meant renewable electricity growth that has become less exclusively focused on offshore wind, although that remains critical, while oil and gas production remains steady this decade, but pivoting increasingly toward natural gas, and with a focus on reducing the carbon intensity of that production. As Peter said, I'm joined today with Anders in his first leadership dialogue at our forum to discuss the state of play at Equinor and the industry at large. So, Anders, thank you very much for making it out. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Well, I would like to start with addressing the elephant in the room, or rather the elephant outside this room, and hopefully it stays that way. And that is the significant protester presence that we have seen at this event. And today, in fact, today's kind of event has been couched as their profit, our loss, stop Rosebank. For those of you who may not be aware, Rosebank is an oil development that Equinor and the partner Ithaca just recently sanctioned west of Shetland. And it's going to provide about 8% of the UK's oil output through 2030 once online. But it has really become kind of a lightning rod, a symbol for the anti-oil movement, seen as an indication of kind of government and corporate lack of attention to the climate crisis. So I'm just kind of wondering, Anders, both what's going on today and just the wider pushback you've seen, what are your impressions? What's your response?
Well, thank you. First of all, I do respect that they can actually protest. I think it's important in a democracy that we have different views, that they're allowed actually to do that protest, because obviously in the energy transition there is no easy answers. Everything is the dilemmas, and people will have different views on it. Personally, I really believe in a balanced energy transition. I believe that developing Rosebank will be needed. Oil and gas will be needed also in the energy transition. Our strategy is to invest in oil and gas, renewables, low-carbon solution, and that's exactly what we do here in UK. Rosebank, Dogger Bank, that came on stream just a few weeks ago, the world's largest offshore wind park when it's finished. That demonstrates the totality in our strategy. But having said that, Rosebank, difficult decision. I spent a lot of time thinking about it, but in the end, I think this is the right decision for UK and for Equinor.
Well, I mean, one of the things that seemed to inform that decision and the UK government's approval of it is the work to reduce that carbon intensity, right? So you're looking to electrify the operations, and I believe you've put forward a number that the project will have a carbon intensity of about 3 kilograms CO2 equivalent per BOE, which is certainly top tier across the industry. But I'm curious, kind of what do efforts like that do to the break-evens of projects like Rosebank? Are they kind of just on the margins, or do you really need the underlying resource to be kind of that much better to cover these additional costs?
Well, first of all, we have been working with reducing the CO2 emission from our production for many, many years. Really, kind of scope 1 and scope 2 is our responsibility. So we have used power from shore on the Norwegian continental shelf for many years. We have developed this technology. We have, together with our suppliers, we've been able to lower the cost using power from shore. And that means that the average CO2 emission in intensity actually per barrel is below 7 kilo for our portfolio. And of course, developing new oil fields today, it requires that we think very hard how to produce that new oil and gas with as low emission as possible. And that's why we also work with that in Rosebank. We use all the type of technologies in Brazil to make sure that every new field we put on stream will have as low emission as possible. When you don't have a carbon tax, it is additional cost. But with carbon tax, like we have in Norway, actually it's a positive NPV when we do those kinds of investments.
That makes sense.
So we will continue to do that also going forward.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would like to talk kind of maybe break-evens just more broadly across the industry. I think one of the things that we saw out of kind of the COVID downturn is there was almost this race to the bottom from companies. How low can your break-even go, right? And certainly this was to demonstrate portfolio resiliency, a commitment to capital discipline. But I do feel like some of those comments have kind of silently moved to the side as we sit amid cost inflation and even maybe in some corners decarbonization. What's your sense of where break-evens are? Are there enough projects out there still to kind of meet prior promises, or might there need to be a little readjustment?
Well, we are not immune to cost increases, and obviously with the geopolitical tension, the war in Ukraine, all our suppliers need to find new sub-suppliers, and that kind of have a cost impact. But remember also that break-evens for a project is not only affected by the cost level from suppliers. It's about the concept you select, the way you produce the oil and gas. So we have been in this kind of challenges before. In 2014 when the oil price went down, we had quite high break-even as an industry and as a company. We ran a project called STEP at that point in time, really looking into how we could improve our project. And this is the same toolbox we're using now, both in oil and gas, but also in renewables, where we do see the same cost pressure as well. So it's kind of working together with the suppliers, looking into how can we improve this project, what is the concept look like, can we include suppliers from the concept selection even before to really optimize this. This is how we work, and so that keeping the break even at the level that is investable.
Yes, that makes sense. I mean, one of the things, to your point, we heard yesterday from a number of contractors was this idea of, because we have both oil and gas investment, but also renewables kind of competing for that same contractor and supply chain space, it's getting very tight, and so perhaps designs may need to change, modularization, things of that sort may be required. Would you kind of agree with that assessment?
Absolutely. Oil and gas used to be an industry where we very much tailor-made, yes, bespoke solutions every time and so on. I think since 2014, as an industry, we moved beyond that and kind of working more integrated with suppliers, more modular design, etc. And basically, renewables is exactly that. So I think also here, if we continue working together, and reuse, both we and the suppliers can be better off, and that is needed actually to be able to develop enough energy that the world needs.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes a lot of sense. Well, going back to the kind of electrification efforts, I know in kind of your home country, it hasn't been without controversy because there have been concerns that as kind of wider industry use of clean energy picks up, that you could maybe be stressing the system or raise prices, for the average consumer. How are you kind of navigating some of these challenges?
No, I think this is the same kind of difficult challenge that many others see, with this, not in my backyard, because, if you use my power to power your oil and gas installations, maybe, my power will be a little bit higher, or kind of the local industry will not get the power. So that's the debate we are having. But on the in Hammerfest, up north in Norway, we have an LNG plant, and that plant will now be, we have power, well, it's actually on the shore, but we'll get power from the network. We call it power from the shore anyway. Right. And that has created a lot of discussions, because we need more power lines, grids, and we need a lot of power, which people think could be used in the local communities instead. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we also need to modernize the oil and gas industry. So by modernizing and using electrical power for producing LNG, we are able to support Europe with energy that has no CO2 emission while being produced.
Right.
And the LNG plant in Hammerfest is actually providing 6 million homes with gas every year here in Europe, UK.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to jump over the pond to the US for a moment and just kind of discuss government policy supports for clean energy more broadly. Certainly we've seen the Inflation Reduction Act has been kind of heralded as this great boon for clean energy investment, although the application is a bit stalled while some guidance remains outstanding around the application of tax credits and things of that sort. But Equinor has been also on the front lines when it comes to, say, offshore wind and trying to work with state utilities in getting a price that allows the projects to be economic. And just last week, one of your efforts to renegotiate was turned down. How do you just kind of see the landscape in the US right now? Where are kind of the biggest impediments, and then where can things still progress even if everything isn't maybe quite so perfect?
Yeah, this is probably not kind of just a U.S. problem. I think it's more kind of an offshore wind challenge at the moment. Probably we can say that the offshore wind had its first kind of crisis. Coming from an oil and gas industry, we know that it goes ups and down, and kind of what you do, you roll up your sleeves and you start really working to make sure that we are able to move the projects forward. And that's exactly what we're going to do as well with the offshore wind possibilities we have, including in the US. Of course, together with our partner BP, we're disappointed that this first was turned down. But this is not the last word. We will continue working with our suppliers, working with the local governments to find solutions that we are able to move forward the offshore wind developments in the US. And remember, this will kind of have a lot of investments in local communities, at the same time securing power for a lot of New York homes.
Mm-hmm. Well, since you likened this a bit to, offshore wind's first crisis, this maybe answers it a bit, but I'd like to dig in more, if you look just more globally at offshore wind, how bad is it, right? There are so many headlines about how challenged it is, and you kind of get the sense of it's just kind of doomed. So where does it kind of sit? I mean, is this temporary where we may see projects, move a little bit more slowly, kind of maybe the pipeline gets moved around a bit, or are we really looking at something where offshore wind's viability is genuinely kind of systemically challenged versus solar, onshore wind, even nuclear?
Well, first of all, I haven't lost my sleep, because I think offshore wind will have, be an important part of the energy transition, and it's an important part of the renewables. Remember, not all countries are able to develop huge solar parks and onshore wind parks. So many countries do need to have offshore wind as a part of the energy mix. Obviously, I think, as an industry here, offshore wind industry, we probably said too much that this is going to be very, very cost efficient very rapidly. We have never let the suppliers, allow them to really make cost efficient manufacturing sites. Every time we have asked for, do you have 12 megawatts? Okay, do you have 13? Do you have 14? And so there's never been this time to really standardize. I think the industry and the suppliers now really understood this, and they're working really hard on it. That will take down the cost. Governments working hard on kind of what is the right method to award seabeds, support regimes, and so on. So I'm absolutely sure in the long run, this will be a very, very good industry, and we are well positioned in this industry in US, in UK, Poland, and also in Germany. So, and there is a lot of opportunities coming up in the future that we will definitely look into.
Yeah, no, that's very, very interesting. Well, one thing that we saw recently was the IEA, updated its net zero to 2050 roadmap, and while certainly the world is not on the trajectory to meet that scenario, I'm just curious, personally, what you found the most insightful, or what you found the most applicable to Equinor as you kind of keep tabs on how your strategy is faring.
No, first of all, I think it's very important to say that we need a balanced energy transition, and any net zero scenario really tells us that this is going to be tough. But we need a lot of CCS. We will need a lot of hydrogen. We need more renewables, and we still need oil and gas. That's really kind of whatever scenario you look at is more or less the same conclusion. And remember also that we haven't really started on a global level on the energy transition yet. You know, all the renewables is addition because of the increased energy need. So you know, my takeaway is that we need to kind of invest more in renewables. We really need to make sure that CCS now is a viable technology, not to kind of keep oil and gas longer in the mix, but you know, because we need it to remove the CO2, particularly for the hard to abate you know, heavy industry like steel and cement and so on. So it needs to be a technology that is actually commercial attractive. We have the first project, Northern Lights, together with Total Energy and Shell. That was sanctioned some years ago, and next year this will be up and running, where we're actually taking CO2 from a facility in Holland and bring it by ship to the western coast of Norway and pump it to subsurface on the Norwegian continental shelf and store it there permanently, safely.
Right. Well, Equinor kind of sits in a unique position relative to most of the other companies that we've had on stage, in that you have your shareholder base is both the state, but then also these private shareholders. And I'm just curious if you kind of reflect on maybe the conversations you were having before the Ukraine crisis and now. How has the dialogue changed? Are the asks on you different? And are there differences between those two groups?
No, you know, the state and the private investors, they really have the same view. I think we have developed an energy transition plan, and we got 97% approval rate for that at the AGM. So we have a very strong mandate to follow the strategy that we do have. But you know, you talk about the war, and you know, particularly what's before the war was that governments that we serve with our energy, they were talking more about climate ambitions and so on before the war. But after the war, and you know, even you know, in the autumn of 2021, you know, our telephone started to really ring in Equinor, and the question was from Europe and UK, can you provide us with more gas? And I think that has been really the theme over the last years, how we've been able to support governments and the countries in North Europe with enough gas. And one of the highlights so far in my career, I've been now CEO for 3 years, was then when I could take the Secretary General of NATO, an EU President, and also the Norwegian Prime Minister to visit the Troll field, where 10% of the gas demand is actually covered by this one facility. It's 300 meters deep from the deck and down to the bottom of the platform. And I took those three, you know, the NATO Secretary General, the EU President, and the Prime Minister of Norway, down an elevator, 300 meters. It's the longest elevator pitch I ever had, actually, to tell them about, you know, Equinor and you know how we develop. And at the bottom there are three export pipelines, and each of those pipelines actually had 3.33% of the gas to Europe. And I think, you know, when Ursula von der Leyen really kind of laid her hand on that pipe, she saw the importance of energy security and kind of how oil and gas industry can also support countries. And the good thing was that was 8 minutes up in the elevator as well, yes. So I had another chance.
You really got to make your case.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We will have time for a couple questions from the floor, so get those ready. But one thing that has been kind of featured throughout our conversation so far is around the upcoming COP28 Climate Summit. And I know you've attended in the past. Are you planning on going this year?
Well, it's not finally settled, but I'm invited.
Yes.
So that's good. I was there last time as well.
Right.
I think it's an important, you know, energy transition is hard. Dialogue is absolutely necessary, and I think also this year Dr. Sultan is trying to lay a foundation for a dialogue. And when people invite you to a dialogue, you should show up. So that's my starting point. And I think our industry, the oil and gas industry, the energy industry, and the other big emitters, we really need to sit down together and see how can we actually accelerate removing CO2. And there will be some suggestions and actions down there, I hope. And I hope as many companies as possible can sign up for this. And that we can kind of accelerate the way we decarbonize our industry. So because at the moment, we haven't decarbonized anything by using renewables instead of fossil fuels. We just added it. So it's important to really reduce the CO2 from the oil and gas production and the heavy industry.
Well, I mean, along those lines, because you are hardly the first to mention the kind of excitement around actually having the opportunity to be part of that dialogue, with the upcoming COP talks. I mean, if you were to go and leave, what specifically do you hope to be achieved? Is it just that people actually kind of hear the message, that there's kind of more concrete, elements of agreement? What would you be looking for?
Well, as I said, as an industry, we emit quite a lot of methane and also CO2 while producing. We as a company, we have put forward targets together with the other companies in the OGCI and so on. And we hope that what we have done can inspire others as well to do the same, such that we as an industry are able to contribute much more than we do today. Because our product, oil and gas, will be needed for a while, but the way we produce it will really matter when we still need oil and gas.
That makes sense.
So that's what I hope we get out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like I said, we do have time for questions from the floor. Are there any? Let's see. Oh. Yes.
Thank you. Nick Coleman from S&P Global Commodity Insights. One area where cost increases seem to be particularly pertinent is the Barents Sea and Arctic. I think you've got cost escalation at the Castberg project, and Wisting is being delayed. So my question is, would you support building a gas pipeline down from the Barents Sea as a sort of economizing measure? And if I could possibly sneak in a second one, are you worried about Russian exports through the Arctic of crude oil, which seem to be an increasing phenomenon, presumably close to your coastline or your country's coastline? Thank
you. The starting point about gas production in the Barents Sea is really the resources. At the moment, we have enough resources to really kind of build a pipeline. So we are very happy that the Norwegian government actually put out more acreage to do exploration, particularly around existing infrastructure. And then in that way, we will see, what is really the volume we need to build a pipeline. So this pipeline is now, as the Norwegian government looking into it, we are supportive of it, but it will be about the resource base, that could trigger something like that. And we are not at that place at the moment. And obviously, new infrastructure in the Barents Sea do have a cost, so we need to find very cost-efficient ways of doing it. As everyone else, I'm always worried, when we transport crude in ships around coasts and in harsh environment. That's why we have a very good shipping organization in Equinor that really do tough wetting on every company that we rent to transport. Let's hope that everyone else is doing exactly the same good work also when transporting oil, along the Norwegian coast.
I think there's one in the back. Sorry, it's hard to see.
Thank you very much. Ron Busa from Reuters. Anders, I want to ask you a question you're probably very used to hearing. How do you see Europe handling the gas market going into this winter? It seemed to be in quite a good place. actually, you know what? That's the only question for now. Thank you.
Okay. When we in Equinor, when we talk about the gas market, we do as you here in UK, we start talking about the weather, because I think that is the most important element at the moment. We know that the gas storage is quite full at the moment, and that Europe is in a much better place than last year. But there's a lot of variables, around the gas market at the moment. Keeping in mind that some years ago, Europe could really turn up and down the production. After the demand during the seasonal variations and so on. Europe is not in that place at the moment. So it's really, from Norway, we will do everything we can to make sure that we maximize the gas we send through the pipes. But Europe will be dependent on the LNG supply, weather in Asia and the competition for the LNG supply. Then we have the weather, how much electricity renewables will produce, etc. So it's so many variables that we have to look into now. So for us, we spend time, understanding all these variables and see how they're changing. And we're actually expecting the gas market to be quite volatile over the winter. And then we will see how the winter has been like, what we can expect from next summer and towards the next winter.
Well, we have time for another question, and I actually would like to ask it because we didn't get to Brazil, and it's certainly a country where you have been very active recently. You've made renewables acquisitions. I know you're kind of partnering with Petrobras to evaluate offshore wind developments. You recently FID'd an oil and gas development, and I'm kind of curious, as your business interests diversify, right? How does it perhaps change how you look at the geography of your portfolio, and do certain places kind of rise up in new ways because of the oil, gas, and renewables elements?
Yeah, so basically we have shrink our oil and gas portfolio a little bit in terms of geographical footprint. We took a hard look at many of the countries, and we saw kind of what is core and what is non-core. And a typical core country now is a country where we are able to provide oil and gas, but also the opportunities to provide either CCS, hydrogen, or electricity, such that we are a partner with the government there to the energy transition. And Brazil is one of those countries. We have quite a large footprint in terms of oil and gas with Peregrino that we developed 20 years ago. We are the first international operator actually, operating a field inside the pre-salt polygon. And we're developing another gas field there now as well, in addition to partnership with Petrobras. But we've just recently bought an onshore Rio Energy company that was onshore wind and solar, and we have a solar plant there from before. We're building another one as well. So we broaden out in Brazil, but we are focusing those countries that we are working in.
So fewer places, but more things to come.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Well, that sounds good. Well, thank you very much for your time, and really appreciate your attention. And thank you so much.
Thank you.